Hey guys, it's Omer from MMOs.com. Do a quick first impression gameplay video for Bless Online, a buy-to-play MMORPG developed and published by Neowiz Games. I'll spend about 10 to 15 minutes running around checking this game out, makes comments. If you guys do want to play Bless or just learn more about it, do check the review on MMOs.com on the link below. And let's go and get started right away. The best part of the game. Look at the booty in this game. Honestly, a lot of Korean games do not have a very good booty, whereas Bless Online's got a pretty quality booty physics and a little bit thick booty. But anyway, with the great news out of the way, let's jump into some of Bless's issues. Now, this is a game that launched into Steam Early Access late in May or so. It's been out in South Korea for about 4 years, at least in closed beta. So the game launched in South Korea back in 2014 in closed beta, and then it kind of went around the world. It launched in Japan as well as Russia, and then it was announced for American release through Area Games, and then some stuff happened, and it never came out through Area. So Neowiz decided to publish it themselves after promising some kind of big rework for the game. The game is out now and has been out for a few weeks, about a month or so into early access, and oh boy, there's a lot of problems with Bless, boys. I know you've probably seen a lot of videos already about this game, but I'm a little bit late to the punch here, but I wanted to play it a bit longer. I wanted to see some of the changes coming out for the game as well before I made a video, and they've been changing quite a bit about this game. First of all, let's talk about what the game is. It's a pretty traditional Korean MMORPG. You have 7 playable races and 5 classes. There'll be more classes later. I know the Korean version, the Russian version, actually an assassin class, which isn't quite out in the Western version just yet. Worth mentioning is that the Russian version as well as the Korean version were all free to play, whereas it seems like only the Western version went with the buy-to-play model, likely because of how successful Black Desert Online was. A few other good things. Graphically speaking, the game looks pretty nice. One of the biggest issues I've had with the game since the game's launch is that it's actually not very well optimized. Very small things will make the game stutter. When you're in an instance dungeon like I'm in right now, I'm the Mausoleum of the Wise Ones. Once you're in here, the game runs pretty well, but if you're in the open world with other players, the game runs terribly slow. So bad, in fact, that the game is it feels unplayable. Even when you bring up the map, when you're in the world map, when you're outside of the dungeons, it just runs really, really poorly. In fact, there's so many optimization issues to this game as well as localization issues. Very simple things just don't make a lot of sense. Skill descriptions aren't very clear. If you look at Flame Trek, for example, it says for N seconds deals 363 damage to an area and additional periodic damage to enemies in the area. It's a specific area skill. Specific area skill just sounds kind of weird, the phrasing of that. And it says for N seconds. It's very clear that N seconds is a placeholder. They meant to put maybe 5 seconds, 6 seconds, whatever N seconds actually is, but they never actually got around to doing it. A lot of really weird production problems with this game. But beyond production problems, there's actually so much wrong with Bless Online, and why I cannot recommend the game today. It does not even feel like an early access title. This game does not feel like it was ready for commercial release, but they actually rushed it out and released it anyway. And I mean, what you're seeing basically is the core gameplay. It's a pretty traditional Korean MMORPG, but really the biggest problem with this game, I would say, is just how much the game has been changing since its release. The biggest problem, I think, is just the fact that the game is nearly unplayable with how poorly optimized it is. But beyond that, it just feels like a super alpha build of a game, because so much of the game is so radically different from the Korean version as well as the Russian version that I played quite extensively, actually. And beyond that, so much is changing as is. I mean, the game launched in late May of 2018, and it launched with some serious flaws. There was literally a dupe problem in the game that affected the Japanese version as well. And the dupe problem existed for the first week, and it obviously led to many people duping items, which kind of destroyed the game's economy. But beyond that, it just so many ridiculous changes. So much so that actually, it just feels like they weren't ready to release the game. I mean, I've never seen a game that was released in some kind of, either open beta stage or early access where there will be no more wipes, where they make such drastic changes. For example, I think on June 1st, 2018, they released a patch which nerfed every class's damage across the board by up to 70%. So imagine waking up one day, instead of hitting for this stack would hit for 600, well, like 400 or so on late May, and literally on June 1st, it went from hitting from 500, 400 to hitting for 100, the same ability. And this attack would hit for 1300, now it's for 500. It's just really weird that the damage numbers changed that much. I mean, the reasoning behind such a drastic change at Neowiz was that basically the numbers on the Western version of the game were a little bit higher than they intended, which is just cannot be true. That is such a disingenuous statement, because there is no way you intended your number to be 300, but it ended up being 900. Were your numbers so off that you accidentally multiplied it by 3? And that's just really bizarre, because these are the kind of changes you would make in a closed beta testing phase where, you can make these changes and it's no big deal because there's a wipe coming afterwards. But anybody who plays the game, after that first week is playing at a disadvantage to a degree because they can level much slower. I actually like the changes because it makes the content a little more challenging. The dungeon I'm in right now, this Mausoleum of the Wise Ones, was actually really hard on the Russian version of the game. Super hard, actually. I have a video of playing it in a previous MMOs.com Grandfest Friday, where I played with like 4 friends, and it just took us a long time to clear the dungeon. Like, the boss would actually destroy us, and it was actually a really fun encounter. But now you can basically do it solo. In fact, the first 2 dungeons of the game are entirely soloable, which is I guess that's their design philosophy. But it's really weird coming from the Russian version, where it was literally impossible to solo, and you had to like really worry about mechanics. That's not the case so much in this version. You can just stomp through them and level up pretty quickly. In fact, the entire leveling curve in this game feels really awkward. Basically, until you reach level like 11 or 12, which is when you unlock the first dungeon, you do the main story quest, you do side quests as needed. It's a pretty traditional MMORPG fare. But as soon as you unlock the first dungeon, you basically solo grind that dungeon non-stop until you reach level like 23 or 24, until you unlock this dungeon right now, and you just solo grind this till you're level 31, 32, and then you go to the next dungeon, and then the third dungeon of the game you actually have to do with a group. But you just basically grind dungeons instead of doing quests or anything like that. And it's weird because my early experience with Bless was actually pretty decent, minus the really bad optimizations. I mean, you really can't launch a game that runs at like really piss poor FPS. The only reason the game looks decent right now is because I am in an instance dungeon. You try playing this game in the world map, it just runs terribly. And I'm on a GTX 1080, and I have some serious FPS issues with this game. And that's after I ran countless tweaks to the game's configuration files and followed all those tips on how to make the game run better, and it still runs really poorly for me, which is really bizarre. So the biggest issue is for sure the fact that it's really poorly optimized, and it hasn't changed since the Russian version. Both the Russian and Korean version of the game have suffered from this problem, and it looks like it has not been addressed. One of the speculations on why it runs so poorly is that it's built on DirectX 9, which is super old technology, and the game is built on Unreal Engine 3, which of course has been outdated with Unreal Engine 4, which has been out for I think 3 or 4 years at least now. But the DX9 is it's super old. And in fact, if the game it runs so poorly. I actually looked at the game files out of curiosity. The game has like 70,000 files in the game's folder, which normally isn't a big deal. But then I compare it to like games like MapleStory 2, and I compare it to games like Final Fantasy 14. Those games have like less than 500 files. This game has like 75,000 files, which is just really bizarre. I mean, when you have all those game files being loaded up, it's going to create some lag issues. In fact, literally just launching this game from Steam takes like 2 minutes before you even get to the splash screen to play the game, which is unbelievably bizarre. Like, why does it take 2 minutes to do that? There's just so much weirdly wrong with this game. However, if you can look past all those obvious flaws, you have a Korean grinder you can enjoy playing for a bit. Honestly, I had fun with this game for the first like 15-20 levels or so until I started running dungeons, and I just started raffle stomping through dungeons when they were super easy, and it just became really boring because they were super easy, and after playing the Russian version where it was a bit of a challenge. I mean, I really like that design philosophy where the early dungeons are challenging. It requires players to work together. Like this fight, for example, was if you get hit by any of these abilities, it was actually mega devastating. You have to kind of restart the fight. He's gonna be underneath. He's gonna pop up on me. I gotta make sure I dodge out of the way. Though oddly, he just teleported back instead of jumping out of the ground. Really, I guess I don't know why it appeared that way for this time, but if you can look past those obvious flaws, there's a game here. But my biggest concern is if this is a free-to-play game, honestly, I don't think it would be that bad, and a lot of the criticism would be a little bit lighter. But it's a buy-to-play game. It costs money. It's out. They didn't do any kind of closed beta testing, which is really bizarre because you had a dupe problem in the game. Your classes and the game was so entirely wonky that you decided to nerf across the board by 70%. Every skill in the game got nerfed by like 70% damage overnight. Like, how can that even happen? Like, in a live game, in a closed beta alpha game that happens, and there's no wipe. This is why you have wipes. This is why you have closed beta, so you can play with all these numbers and get to a number you like. I've never in my life seen a game nerf damage across the board by 70%. That's just so insane that you do that in a live game. And since then, they've made other drastic changes, though nothing nearly as drastic. They've actually made nerfing the damage made the dungeon a little bit harder, but you can still solo them, so they're still like really easily soloable. They've also nerfed monster XP, and they've just recently buffed all the classes by like another 10% or so to make them even faster. We're level 32 now. Killing the bosses in these dungeons you give a lot of experience. This is like the best way to level up is kill bosses in dungeons. We got like a few thousand for that. There you go, 4,700 for that bad boy. We'll get more in the next dungeon too when I get there. There's also another big problem with this game is once you get to endgame, it just really a lot of the content that was out in the Korean version, the Russian version, just aren't out in the Western version just yet. I mean, it's really bizarre because it's not like they're doing a great job localizing the content, so it's weird that there's a big delay between the releases. I mean, there's so much in the game that's not well localized. Like, the skills are actually really poorly explained as well. Like, it just seems like minimal effort went through these. Like, if you bring up your skill menu, again, like I said, Like, just flame strike, specific area skill. Effective distance 20 meters. Like, what is a specific area skill? I think what they mean to say, it's like you place the skill where you want to launch it. Like, it's a targeted skill. But specific area skill is odd. Like, it's so much of the language in this game, of the UI tooltips and elements, just make no sense. They're just really poorly worded and confusing to a degree. There's some screenshots on Twitter of some really bizarre ones where it makes no kind of sense. You have to actually just kind of like trial and error to see what your abilities do, which is really bizarre considering they spent money to voice act this game. I mean, they hired voice actors for this game, but they couldn't translate the UI elements. I mean, real talk, you don't need voice acting in these games. People aren't playing Bless Online for the story. I mean, very few MMORPGs are played for the story. I mean, outside of games like Final Fantasy XIV and Star Wars: Old Republic, maybe World of Warcraft, the lore and the world, while, you know, it's a part of the game, aren't the most important part, especially when they're so poorly translated anyway. I mean, any kind of budget spent hiring voice actors should have went towards making the tooltips more clear, and the UI and the UI elements just make more sense. There's very minor things as well. It just shows they really don't care. It's really bizarre. Like, the S in store like isn't capitalized, and like everything else is capital. Why isn't the S capital? There's just so many little details in this game that make no sense. Like, actually, on my way to this dungeon before I started recording this video, I ran into a few other odd issues. If you look at water in the game and you pan your camera down so your camera is beneath the water in the swamp, and you move the camera back up, your screen goes blue for like 4 seconds. I mean, I'm not sure that that was intentional to make some ambiance thing, but it makes no sense because the swamp water wasn't even blue. It was like this weirdly clear green color. But when you pan your camera out, it just turns blue for some reason. So, and it lasts for like 4 seconds, which is really bizarre. The production value is just simply not good with Bless. And I mean, maybe the musical score is somewhat redeeming, but a lot of it feels generic as well. I mean, they did hire Hans Zimmer to do the musical score for this game, and he's a pretty well-known composer, a super well-known composer. He did stuff for Interstellar and a lot of other like big-budget Hollywood movies. But it's really unfortunate that this game has suffers from so many issues. I mean, the biggest issue that turned most people off was just how piss poorly the game ran, and that's really inexcusable. You know, you play this even today, it runs so poorly. Before I got to this dungeon, it just ran so incredibly badly. I mean, words cannot do it justice, and I'm not trying to be overly harsh here, because if this game was free to play and it was better optimized, most of the problems could be overlooked. Most of it could be overlooked. I mean, there are other issues with the game as well. Like, the balance issues are hilarious. The fact that you have to tweak the numbers by 70% overnight shows you that you spent no time balancing this game, or spent any time really thinking about the game's design. But that stuff can be overlooked and fixed in the long term. But it's just really bizarre that a month after release, the game still runs so poorly. And I don't think they can ever actually be fixed. It's a fundamental problem with the game, with the way it was, you know, built on Unreal Engine 3 and DX9, that these issues simply are just not going to be fixed. I mean, they made a lot of money since launching on Steam already. The game's player base, I think, peaked at 30,000 on launch week, and it's already down to averaging about 5,000, 6,000, and it seems to be on the way down further. I mean, had this been free to play, had this been better optimized, everything else I think would have came together a bit better. But it just seems like that is not going to happen. I mean, the character model is definitely not bad either. I mean, my character's pretty got a nice rack, nice assets. Yeah, I do like the booty in this game. That's one of the redeeming aspects. Most Korean MMORPGs I play just do not have a very good booty, but at least with Bless Online, you got a pretty respectable booty. Combat is it used to be tap targeted with the Russian version. You have a bit more mobility now, and it's not quite action oriented, but you can actually cast while moving, which feels kind of weird, but I guess it makes combat a little more interesting. Though I'm really just running around non-stop casting the same spell, so it's not like super involved. PvP late game is a balanced nightmare. In fact, I mean, with the balance, besides just across the board bizarre balancing decisions, two classes in the game, the Archer and the Berserker, were just hilariously imbalanced. I try not to criticize balance too much because there's a lot more that goes to balance than we players can typically understand. And I know companies like Blizzard and Riot Games get a lot of crap for every time they make a big patch, but the reality is, when they make those changes, they try to explain the thought process and why they made those changes, and they're typically data driven. Whereas in this game, the Berserker and the Archer were just simply unplayably bad. Like, they were so weak compared to other classes, and Guardians were just hilariously broken in PvP because they were impossible to kill. And the PvP actually is really bizarre as well. I mean, the game utilizes an open world PvP system, so if you see members of the opposing faction in outside the town, you can just attack and kill them, which is, it's kind of neat. But the way it's set up is it's just kind of odd, because you get nothing for killing other players besides griefing them, which is really weird, because at least in World of Warcraft you got the honor kills and honor points, which weren't really meaningful, but at least you kept track of some points. In this game, when you kill someone, you get almost nothing. You really get nothing for it. There's really no need to do it either, but you just do it for fun. And the factions have actually the same races and classes as well, so it's not like well divided the way WoW was. There's some emotes in the game as well, but they're actually really weird. Like, Emote dances joyfully. They're not. I guess it's breaking out over here, but the dances and the emotes just aren't aren't good either. I mean, a lot of you know, lower budget Korean anime MMORPGs have you know, way better looks and way better animations. Let's see if we can bust out a slash dance. There we go. But I mean, they're there. I'm not sure where the sand is coming out of for this, but there you go. You're seeing some sick dance moves. There's your actual skill slots are a bit of a resource still. You know, basically I have these 3 attacks that can. There's 3 different builds. You got like my character. I can do flame tactics, mixed tactics, cold tactics, atmospheric tactics, and whichever one I use, I have access to 3 main skills, and those kind of branch off into 3 other skills. So you have that, and then you have these non-chain abilities, which are basically you can equip 3 of these at once, and these are kind of like your actual toolbar slots become a resource because you know you can't equip all of them at once. You can only equip 3 at once. So there's some customizations to that regard, but obviously there's gonna be, you know, meta builds and what works best and whatnot. But you know, there's not too much individual character customization in that regards. And you can pretty much change those at will too. So there's very little. We actually pulled a bit too much, but I think we'll be okay. Yeah, we just pulled another guy too. If you pull this many when you're lower level, we're gonna get dumpster. I'm on the higher tier for this dungeon. This dungeon is soloable right when you get in, though it's definitely gotten a little bit harder since they nerfed the numbers. But it's still, you can still solo it though for sure. Hopefully, he can kill this guy, this group without dying. Typically, you don't want to pull more than 2. 2 is typically the magic number for this, and we're gonna get them anyway. We did take a lot of damage this time, so it's actually a little bit scary. Please select a valid target. We can loot these guys too, but this game has a really bizarre system for like trash loot. Almost all trash loot is utterly worthless. Like these bones sell for almost nothing. Well, they sell for 84 now, so they might have changed that. But I remember when I first started playing, like 84 copper is nothing. You would get trash loot in this game that sells for literally 1 copper, which was so bizarre. Like almost all the trash loot would sell for literally 1 copper. Numbers are a little bit higher now, but I mean it's still pretty garbage. But I remember my inventory being full of bones that sold for 1 copper each. Like no matter what you looted, it would sell for 1 copper. So they've increased that a bit now, which I guess makes more sense. And we can kill our big boy Lich Tiberius here. This is again. And really, you're going to be running this dungeon quite a few times. I've already ran this dungeon over a dozen times. And after this, I can move on to dungeon number 3. And from there, I can start doing some actual group play. But here might be a good time to call it. We're at 17 minutes. Ultimately, I think everyone was looking forward to Bless as a fun MMORPG, something to look forward to. But it's definitely been a bit of disappointment. The biggest problem is that the game runs poorly, really bad balance and design decisions. I mean, underneath its core, Bless is a very generic game. It really offers nothing new. Some of the environments look interesting, but beyond that, it's this big open world that's interesting, but it just runs really poorly. Words cannot do it justice how poorly this game runs. I mean, anyone who's played it, you know, can vouch for that. Even with all the INI tweaks and the graphical tweaks, it just runs really, really poorly. And the design makes no sense. I mean, I've never seen a game across the board nerf 70%. And these kind of numbers are happening on a live service with no further wipes, you know. If they did that in closed beta, it makes a lot more sense. But it was done on a live service, which makes no kind of sense. But yeah, if you really want to play a new MMORPG, I still recommend passing on this one. But, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. You can definitely get some fun out of it. I actually had some fun out of this game for the first, like, 10, 15 levels. But beyond that, I got bored pretty quickly. But yeah, I recommend passing on this one. But if you want to check it out, it is buy to play on Steam. I am betting this one goes free to play within a year. That's my guess. But anyway, guys, if you guys want to learn more about Blast or play it yourself, do check the full review on MMOs.com on the link below. Anyway, guys, later.